Hello! In this video I would like to show you several ways how to improve the performance of your automation exported cars to beamng by altering the settings in some of the config files which are inside the let's say mod folder of the car you export. Now we will look at adjusting launch control, transmission settings, and few other details. Now for that I've just stitched together this test car very quickly. It is a four-wheel drive with 260 kilowatts. That translates to around 350 horsepower. And now I will export it to beamng. So I will do it 2 times. First like that. And second time I will call it stock, and we will use that as a reference, performance reference. Now let's look how to actually adjust some of these settings. So let's open the mod folder. I have only these 2 cars that I just exported. I'm gonna open the car that I want to adjust. I'll go to vehicles, test car, and I'll go to Camso engine JB. This is basically the file that we will be adjusting. Okay. I'm gonna close the automation game. Now before we even jump to beamng, I'm gonna change a few of these numbers. So if you take a closer look at this config file, you can see that you can actually adjust pretty much everything about the engine. For example, making it 20,000 horsepower and stuff like that, RPM to 20,000 RPM, but I will only adjust settings which should be realistically adjustable. So let's look at it. Okay, so the first thing that I think is very important and should be basically added to as default values or something like these is, let's press Ctrl F and we're gonna search for launch, and here in the middle of the config file, vehicle controller, these 2 lines are interesting. So clutch launch start RPM, this means that when our engine reaches this RPM, let's say the AI or the automatic transmission will start releasing clutch to engage the transmission. Now 700 RPM is of course really low, because we are idling at around 700. So before we engage the transmission, we would like to spool up the engine a little bit to not stall it and stuff like that. So I'm gonna increase that to, this is a performance car kinda, so let's put it up to 240, 2400 I mean. And a clutch launch target RPM, this is the RPM at which the engine will try to launch itself, or I don't exactly understand how does this work and how does it affect the game, but I from what I tried, it's best to have this as high as possible. But if you have it too high, the engine or the transmission won't actually shift properly. I don't know, I once again I don't know why exactly is that, but let's just put it to 350. Basically it's somewhat higher than the first number, I guess, is the go-to value. Now there are some other numbers which are important, but these are, at least I believe, it wouldn't be fair to change these. These are like generated based of the design, and your design will how well your car is designed will affect these numbers. So I will just let them be. Now we're gonna scroll up, and we are looking for this right here. Low shift down RPM, high shift down RPM, low shift up RPM, and high shift up RPM. Also this line is important. So this right here dictates the behavior of our transmission. So low shift down RPM means that when the engine hits this RPM, it will shift down. So this basically dictates the lower limit of the RPM that the engine will try to operate at. Now this is quite reasonable, around 1000, right? Because of course this is a petrol engine, so we don't want to reach very low RPMs because we will just have no power there. But I think that since for costing on highway or just at constant speeds, there's no problem of reaching like 900, something like that, right? So low shift up RPM, this is important. This number means that when the engine, only when the engine exceeds this RPM, it will shift up. So for example, now this is also quite reasonable. Usually it's quite a bit higher. So now it means that if we, for example, just coast along, once again at high speed, if we are not above 2060, the car will not shift up, and this is pretty unrealistic, at least for some cars. So when we just go at constant speeds, we really want the transmission to go to the highest gear. There's no real reason to, for example, coast at have a fifth gear selected when we have 7 gears. So I will change this to around 1400. So the when just coasting at constant speed, the car will try to be as low as 1400 RPM. Now high speed shift down. Now if I understand correctly, there are basically like two mods at which the car can operate. Basically when you push the throttle down and you want power, it will operate at these high shift and the high shift up at these numbers, and when there is not power required, it will work with these numbers. Now you can see these two symbols here, which means that this line actually does not like exist in when the game goes through the code. It doesn't see this, and you can see that many comments and stuff like that begin with that, because this is not part of the code. Now that's because here there's a calculate optimal load shift points true, I believe. Once again, I didn't I didn't write this code, so this is just what I kinda with trial and error guessed how it worked. And because this is true, basically the game calculates these points automatically. So I won't touch that, but you can change this to false and then play around with this and see how it works. And now with it, another very important number is this one. Now you can read this, but from my experience, or at least what I was able to kind of figure out, this basically means how aggressively the transmission will try to shift. So how quick it will respond to your throttle input, and also to the lag of your throttle input. Now this is quite slow, at least I believe for me. So I will put this all the way up to like 4 to really, this is made too much, but at least we will see it properly in the game. Okay, so these are all the changes for now, and we will hop into BeamNG and see the difference. Okay, so here we are in BeamNG. So let me select the vehicle. First I'm gonna go for the stock car. Okay, so what we are gonna be looking at first is the time to 100 kilometers. Okay, this is an app that you can download from the repository. Okay, so let's see what happens if I just select the S gear and we'll just floor the throttle. Okay, you can see that we achieved 5 seconds, almost exactly, so let me just do it a few times again more. And also once without launch, without ESC. Okay, you can see that the time is basically constantly 5 seconds. So now this is not bad, but what is happening is that because the clutch behavior is not changed, the car really spends too much time at lower RPMs. It doesn't stall the engine because it's quite light and it has more than 300 horsepower, so it still, you know, pick up the speed quite quickly, but it really spends too much time in the lower RPM band. So our modded cars should not do that, because we changed the clutch behavior to engage only at 2040 RPM. So when I floor the throttle, it will spool to 2040 and only then it will start engaging the clutch. So let's see what happens to our time. So as you can see, we have shaved off 3/10 of the second, which is a lot, basically. That's a lot for acceleration. And this is of course repeatable. Because this is the super flat map, times will be really constant. And also without ESC. Okay, so another important thing that we did is that we changed the behavior of the transmission. So I have the stock car loaded, I will just load it again. And now what I will do to show it off is I'm gonna accelerate under full acceleration to 100 kilometers per hour, that's 60 miles of course, and then I will stay at that speed and you can watch how the transmission behaves. So we are coasting at 60 miles at 100 kilometers per hour, and you can see that the transmission refuses to shift up to 7th gear. Now this speed is not unreasonable, of course, this rev speed. However, this car has plenty of power and it can definitely afford to coast at like 1500 RPM. It will be able to keep the even way more speed than 100 kilometers per hour. So let's load the modded car and see how it behaves. Okay, so full throttle to 100 kilometers per hour, and then I will coast at that speed. So as you can see, this time the transmission shifted up to 7th gear, so we are coasting at 2000 RPM, and also even though the first shift is still quite like it takes a while, but then when it started shifting, the shifts were way quicker. So now if I just start to accelerate, the engine won't mind just dropping the RPMs lower and lower and lower. this was the stock car, we would already be at like 3,500 because we would have like 4th gear. Now when we hit 1400 we should shift up. Or shift down, right? No, it's actually 900, right? When we hit 900 we should shift down. Right, so we shifted. And also, just to demonstrate it even more, when coasting at 50 kilometers per hour, no, 60, we need to go over 1400. Yeah, you see we are coasting at 60 and the car still has no problem shifting up all the way up to 7th gear, and we are now at like 1300, what is it, 1200 RPM without problem coasting. So this transmission behavior would not of course behave like that without the changes. Also, now if I floor the throttle, the car should respond quite a bit quickly because of the another settings that we changed. So let's try that. You can see it, the shift was very quick. Once I floored it and walked right away, it shifted out. Okay, so one thing that we're still missing is launch control, because if I press the brake pedal and the throttle pedal, the clutch will engage and we will not move. However, the RPM will go all the way up to the rev limit, and there's no launch control or launch RPM that the car will try to stick to. If I press my hotkey for launch control, of course nothing changes. If I try to lower or extend the limit, nothing changes. So evidently there is no launch control in this vehicle. Of course in automation the launch control is selected, so it's not implemented yet, it seems like, right? Anyway, so before I go into how to set up launch control, of course you can argue that what we can do is just launch from the rev limit, which is true. It gives us both basically the biggest advantages, because we will have the biggest, like the most power available at launch, and also because we just shift up, we have the best reaction time. However, this is not only unrealistic, because of course you don't want to do that, and many cars won't even let you do that. But since this is the all-wheel drive, this car has doesn't have a problem putting all the power through the wheels to the ground. But if, for example, this was only rear-wheel drive, then shifting up or shifting to the rev limit would not be a great idea, because the wheels would just spin and we would not go anywhere. So in that case we would have to kinda eyeball the rev or the engine speed, and then try to shift to the correct engine speed in order to not spin the wheels. So just to demonstrate, since this is a for all-wheel drive and the power is not enough to just basically do a burnout, shifting to the rev limit is actually the fastest way to accelerate. So as you can see, 4.6, this is another 1/10 of the second better. However, this would not work if we have the worse traction. So fortunately there is actually a way how to add launch control, which would be really important. If we had like rear-wheel drive, you could really play with it and find the correct RPM and at which the wheel slip is just enough, so it accelerates as quickly as possible while not spinning the wheels too much. So let's look into that. Okay, so I have closed the beam engine and I have navigated back to the Camso engine .jbeam, which is the config file in the exported car, and I will take this code right here, which I will put into the description, and I will also tell you how did I come up with that. I will take it and I will put it right where is it? Right below the powertrain. We are at the top of the config file, and right below the powertrain we will put it here like that. Now don't forget this bracket, otherwise it won't create the game, but it just won't work. The car won't work. Of course, this the brackets and all the stuff is important in the code, right? So yeah, and so that's it. And now this is the limit at which the car, or the RPM at which the car will try to launch. Now I don't like what to say. I didn't try this enough to just tell you what's the best, but from what I tried, it is a good idea to have the launch control RPM match this or just a touch below, because if it's above, what it will do is basically you press both the pedals, it will match the launch RPM, and then when you lift from the brake, it will jump to this RPM, and only then it will accelerate, which sometimes is quicker because you know, even though it like wastes the RPM, it will actually give a push to the car. So yeah, and also of course in real time, RPM, like launch RPMs are around 3000, 3050, 500, something like that, right? So let's put this to 3050 just to demonstrate it, right? You can play with that yourself. Also, while I'm here, I'm just gonna show you another little setting that you can do right here. Exhaust settings, blah blah blah. We can once again, I don't know how it works but if you comment these two lines, this means that the game will not notice these anymore. Basically you turn off the engine pops, which you know, might be what you want in some cars. Some cars, even though they are powerful, they are not like sports car, and you want a smooth and quiet engine without these pops. So let's just, to demonstrate, let's comment these two lines and turn the pops off. Okay, so we're back in the BeamNG. This time we're trying the launch control. So I'm gonna just load the stock car once again to demonstrate that it doesn't work on the stock car. So I press brake and throttle, and it goes to the ref limit, right? Okay. Test car. Now if I now press brake and throttle, voila, it stops at the defined launch RPM. So now if I, of course, select the gear first, now if I lift the brake, we're starting from the... Now what you might notice is that even though it's not a big difference, our time is now around 400ths of a second slower than if we just go like this. Which is unfortunate. I mean, I don't think it's really realistic, because basically, you know, the launch control is not very precise. It's just kind of jerky when you start from this RPM, and it's not tuned, so it's unfortunate. However, that's not the point of the launch control. It's not necessarily to get us as high 0 to 100 as possible. What it gives us is a much better reaction time, because imagine, or not imagine, I will actually load the track. Okay, so we are on the drag strip, and now this is where the launch control shines, right? Because imagine that you are, of course, waiting right there, and when the light goes green you slam the throttle pedal and you don't have launch control. Once again, there's the option of shifting into the rev limiter, which is fastest, but it's not only not realistic, but it will not work on cars which have either really powerful engine or not four-wheel drive. They will just do burnout. Okay, so let's select the gear, and now I will launch without launch control. So when the light goes green, I'm just gonna slam the throttle pedal. Okay, let's do this again. And once again. Okay, so it looks like 13 seconds, 13.1 seconds is somewhat the time that we will be able to do a quarter mile like that. Now let's try with the launch control. So I'm gonna press brake and accelerator. And I'm gonna lift the brake. Very much quicker. So it's not a big difference. However, we get like this was basically almost 2/10 of a second faster time because of the battery reaction time, right? Basically the engine is already spooled up, so there is no waiting for the engine to actually start working. And also lifting the brake is, you know, faster, and it's better reaction time. Let's just do it again. It's faster. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have any questions or suggestions, just leave them down. I will answer them. And yeah, I think it's you know, even though the launch control of course is not better than launching into the rev limit, it's kinda definitely it's cool, and you can play with it, and maybe you can actually make it more efficient, which it definitely would be if the car would be rear-wheel drive and wouldn't be able to once again put the power down. Okay, so that's it, and see you later.